Joined now by Alex Newman, our international correspondent. Alex, thanks for joining us today, and Merry Christmas.
Hey, Merry Christmas to you. Always great to be with you, Duke. Thank you.
Well, we've got a good little stocking stuffer for the day, don't we? We got some good news to report. Homeschool numbers are beginning to skyrocket. More and more kids are leaving the public school system. We now have proof of this. And remarkably, most of this exodus is coming from the big liberal cities, from Los Angeles all the way to Massachusetts. Talk about the story, Alex.
Yeah, I can't even tell you how pleased I was to see this news. It was pouring in from all over the country. The CNN, the New York Times, the NPR, they all picked up on it. There is a deluge of families, just a flood leaving the government school system. There is now panic among the bureaucracy. They're worried about the money, but they're pretending like they're worried about the kids. But depending on what district, what state you look in, anywhere from 5 to 15, some districts even 20% decline in enrollment. When you look at the younger years, the pre-K, the kindergarten, the first graders, massive drops, in some cases 30% lower than 2019. And then they lie. They say, oh, it's because people don't like virtual school. I'm like, oh yeah, we have Freedom Project Academy, and we had record enrollment. So they're just lying. But phenomenal news. Enrollment in government brainwash centers is plummeting. Homeschooling, private schools are doing very well, and this is the best news I could have gotten for Christmas, bar none.
Now, where is this information coming from?
All over the place. So local districts are reporting this, state governments are reporting this, state associations of superintendents are reporting this, and so there's no comprehensive national picture yet. But by looking at local news reports, national news reports, bringing in data from different districts, you can gather a picture. This is happening all across the nation. It's happening in conservative and liberal districts. Phoenix was one of the worst that I found. They had, I think, almost a 15% decline in their enrollment. And you had, of course, the big liberal areas are also losing massive, massive numbers. And so, they're freaking out now about the money. Because most of these states have a formula where the schools get funding based on how many butts they have in the seats, how many victims they have. And so they're all panicking now. Oh, my goodness, we're going to have smaller budgets. And that means children are going to suffer. Of course, it means children are going to be doing much better outside the government schools. But they are frantically looking for more money to fill the gap.
Talk a little bit more about how are the mainstream media sites spinning these numbers? What are they saying about this?
Yeah, there's been a handful of admissions that these trends had started already before COVID began, and there's school board members and officials who are like, yeah, we kind of noticed this before COVID, and it's just continuing. But I think a big part of the propaganda narrative is that this all has to do with COVID, and that's what the education establishment is pushing. What they're saying here, the argument they're trying to make is that all these families left because they're not happy with the COVID, they're not happy with the online learning, but once COVID goes away, they're all going to come rushing back, and at that point, then we're going to have less budgets, and so it's going to be a struggle for them. But when you look at the data carefully, when you look at the statements that are being made, when you look at the trends that were already in place before COVID and the pandemic and the lockdowns began, what you see is that this is actually just a continuation of something that began, and we have had some news reports and some officials who were honest enough to admit that. For example, in Massachusetts, they admitted that enrollment was already declining. It's only just continued during COVID. And so, yeah, they're trying to put a happy face on all this and also try to make sure they keep their money. But I think the facts speak very clearly. What's happening is not a response just to COVID. It is a response to the indoctrination, the radicalization, the sexualization. Our issues have become mainstream now. When you've got the president of the United States, the biggest talk show host in America, Rush Limbaugh, and the biggest evangelical leader in the United States, Franklin Graham, all saying we need to protect our children from government indoctrination centers, you know that this campaign has now moved from the fringes to right smack in the middle of the mainstream. It's only a matter of time, I think, before the Titanic goes down.
In the short time we have left, can you talk a little bit about, do we know if these kids are going more into homeschooling or more into private schooling? Is this Christian education they're pursuing, or is it the whole gamut?
Well, the homeschooling has exploded. We know from polls that have been released, the homeschool population has more than doubled just since this pandemic began. So a lot of them are going into homeschools. A lot of them are going into private schools. Unfortunately, some of them are being sucked away by charter schools. But for private schools, Christian schools, and homeschools, this is incredibly positive news.
It really is good news, and it's, like you said, it's a kind of a holiday miracle, right? But what do you expect when you have teachers' unions demanding that the schools stay closed all the way through through June of next year. Expect more of this. So we'll talk more about the consequences of this on the other side, Alex. Back again with Alex Newman, our international correspondent, talking about this really great news as the Christmas season, Christmas Day approaches. We are having more and more kids abandoning public schools, particularly in the large liberal school districts, places like Los Angeles, Phoenix, Arizona, Massachusetts, one of the bluest states in the country, is experiencing high levels of kids just checking out of the public schools. And the inevitable question is, Alex, we know that the progressive educrats, buoyed by the illegitimate election of Joe Biden, we know that they're going to do everything in their power to stop this. What do you expect is going to happen when Biden takes office in January? What's going to happen educationally regarding this trend of kids voluntarily leaving the system?
Yeah, I think no matter what happens in January, whether Donald Trump gets sworn in again or Joe Biden gets sworn in again, no matter what happens with the politics, the education establishment is going to absolutely go to war with educational freedom. They've already started this, and I think they're going to try to use two different approaches, and we've already seen this very clearly materializing. I think it's going to become much more obvious as this reality sinks in. They'll have a carrot approach and they'll have a stick approach. So part of it is they're trying to suck people back into the government system. Here in my school district, they sent out postcards to every homeschool family begging us to please enroll in their, virtual school, government school system, and we'll give you free laptops, and hey, it'll just be so wonderful, and you can still have your children at home. So that's going to be part of it. They want to suck people back in using any means necessary, including bribing families to subject their children to this idiocy again. I think one of the biggest risks that we're going to see, though, Duke, is financial incentives. They are going to try to offer homeschoolers and private schools more and more government money. That's going to be the next big battle. And it'll start off strings free. Oh, it's just not fair that you guys have to pay all this money for property taxes, and your own kids are at home learning. So, we're just going to give you some of your money back, and don't worry, we're not going to tell you what to do. And then the next year they'll say, oh, well, you're getting government money. I mean, we got to have some accountability here. You can't just teach your children that the Bible is true, or, things like that. That'd be crazy. And so that'll be the mechanism. We saw it happen in Sweden. We saw it happen in the Netherlands. We saw it happen in Belgium. That is what they're going to try to do here. I think they'll also try to bring in more heavy-handed government regulation. And, if there's one positive thing about the potential Biden administration, it's that they have really, because of the pressure from the government school teachers unions, they have been firm on not doing these federal tax dollars for private schools, federal tax dollars for homeschoolers. And, we have this debate among friends. I think a lot of these people who argue these things, they're our friends, they're well-meaning, they really do want to help accelerate the exodus from public school. The problem is they're not seeing the long game here, and that is that the educational totalitarians want to give us money only like the way we want to give mice free cheese in the mousetrap, right? It's to get us sucked back into the system and then eventually clobber us. So that's what I think we really need to be on guard for, Duke.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Even when Trump has been for the last 4 years, and Trump has had Betsy DeVos, you still have that ridiculous conference at Harvard University a couple summers ago where they were talking about regulating homeschooling, requiring parents to become accredited teachers before we allow them to teach their own kids at home. And this is under Trump. With Biden in office, he's already bruited a couple of names for us. He's possibly considering teachers union bosses to be the Secretary of Education. You know what's going to happen if you get a union boss, right? It's going to be more money to the unions and much less accountability for public school teachers. That's the platform. More money, less results. More money for us, less you have the right to criticize us. And pay us. If our schools are half empty because the kids have left, pay us full anyway. And now we know that Linda Darling Hammond, of all people, is his education transition person. And she's a huge globalist, Alex. Talk about her for a second. You know her from your work.
I do. And, it's interesting. She has a record of incredible failure when it comes to education. She tried out this idiotic ideas in California, the new Stanford schools or whatever. Total failure. They ended up in the bottom 5% of all the schools in the state of California, which is already a monumental atrocity. So she's also connected with Bill Ayers, the communist terrorist who bombed the Pentagon, the State Department, the Capitol, murdered policemen, on and on and on. So it's almost like a joke. These people are almost like a parody of themselves. And I think that to go back to what we we said in the last segment. This is why parents are leaving the system in massive numbers. They can't believe this idiocy. They'd rather let their tax dollars be burned on a big pile of fire than subject their children to this nonsense.
Yep, teachers, unions, administrators, educrats, every time they talk about education, every single time, it has nothing to do with your kids and making your kids smarter. It has everything to do with social justice normalization, with sex education, with more money for teachers, red for ed. Enough is enough. You've begun to take your kids out, America. Keep them out. Alex, Merry Christmas and thanks for the information. Hey guys, most of you know that our little Dr. Duke show is being hidden and demonetized by the creepy crawlers at YouTube and Facebook. Sadly, this impacts our long-term ability to produce the kind of quality show that you've gotten used to. So we've decided to tackle the problem by launching our own new Patriot Club. Yes, for 99 tax-deductible dollars once a year, 99, you will not only keep our show going, but we'll ship you this fabulous stainless steel tumbler, etched with the American flag and the words, "Freedom never tasted so good." Visit patriotclub.us and become a Patriot member today. That's patriotclub.us to support our show and to drink from the font of freedom.